Pitino's story is fascinating to me. The things that he said after the Seton Hall loss and pretty much threw all of his players under the bus. They can't move laterally. They have to reach in and foul. They didn't know how to do a bounce pass. I've tried to teach it, and after a month they finally learned. And then he kind of doubled down, coming back yesterday and saying, you know what, I didn't do anything wrong, and I didn't insult anybody. And if you're into college sports, Zach Braziller does an unbelievable job, both football and basketball, in the New York Post. And I want to have him on today, and so he could talk to us about the whole Pitino situation. And he joins us now. Zach, it's Michael, Don, and Peter. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. So, Zach, were you more surprised at what he said or more surprised that he doubled down and didn't back off yesterday?
No, I'm not surprised that he didn't back off yesterday. I mean, I'm surprised a little bit of what he said, but, he's kind of said stuff like this all year. He said we're not an athletic team. He said we're not a great team. He obviously went further on Sunday. There's no doubt about it. It's frustration of losing 8 of 10 and blowing one second-half lead after another clearly got to him. I talked to him today, and, he doesn't think he was ripping anymore. Clearly, some of what he said, behind closed doors, they've heard worse from him. It's not, it's not playing for Rick Pitino is incredibly difficult. You can talk to anyone who's played for him, from Kentucky to Louisville to Iona to wherever. He's incredibly demanding. He's incredibly tough. It's very difficult to play for him. It's not a secret. Anyone will tell you that. And, it's obviously the last month has been really, really difficult. But no, I'm not surprised that he didn't back down, because in his mind, he was answering a question. He's going to say what's on his mind. Sometimes he says things I guess some people would think he would regret. But in his mind, he's preparing these guys for what's to come. We talked today. He said, look, these guys are going to be in Europe. They have 2 bad games. They could get cut. That's just the nature of the business area. In his mind, he's preparing them. He's trying to build toughness in them. And look, there's clearly, it was a matter of frustration because they blew another game they really should have won. And look, the players clearly are not thrilled about it. We haven't talked to any players yet. They play tomorrow at Georgetown, so I assume, we will get to talk to players tomorrow. But look, there's no doubt they're not happy about it. Nobody would be happy about hearing their name talked about publicly like that. But, that's just that's who he is. It's part of the whole package with him.
Yeah, but isn't he responsible for having this roster? Doesn't he take any blame for having these players on his team?
100%. Look, I talked to him today about it. He said this season is on him, that he would not grade himself well based on how this season has gone. Look, when he took over, they were going to have to remake the roster. There were some players that were just not going to be able to come back. The culture under Mike Anderson had gotten really bad. He tried to keep A.J. Storr, who's become a very good player at Wisconsin. He not being able to bring his star point guard, his star shooting guard from Iona, Walter Clayton, who ended up in Florida, has obviously hurt them. And they had to bring in a new roster. They had to do it quick. And clearly there were some mistakes. And, look, he bears responsibility for the season. I just posted a story where he said as much. Clearly this year has not gone according to plan. Look, the head coach is the general manager in college. In college sports, especially in college basketball. So it ultimately lays on, it's ultimately on him this season, and he did express that with me today.
We're talking with Zach Braziller of the New York Post, covers college sports for the Post. I'm wondering if he's realizing that in a place like St. John's, with the wild west nature of college sports now, he can't be Rick Pitino, where he has Billy Donovan for 3 or 4 years and turns him into the player that he wants him to be, kind of breaks them down and builds them up. A lot of these guys, Zach, they're going to be one and done. I wonder if he can work the Pitino magic in this era in college basketball now.
Look, that's clearly a fair question. I know on social media in the last 48 hours, there's been a lot of talk about, well, no one's going to stay there. They're not going to be able to get great players, or, if you're a recruit, why did you go there? I talked to people connected to their top recruit, Jaden Glover, and they're firmly all in on coming to St. John's. Mm-hmm. They do have 6 guys who are out of eligibility, and most of those guys were guys that he was critical of on Sunday. They have 4 players that kind of key components of how they want to build this team around, and I expect at least 2 to 3 or even 4 to come back. Ultimately, in this era, it's about NIL. It's about, can you get me to the next level? And so, look, I'm not saying this is going to help recruiting. It obviously won't, but I don't think it's going to hurt it as much as some people think. But to your point about, the revolving door every year, it's clearly a question mark because, people heard Rich Pitino St. John's and they think, oh, well, now all of a sudden we're going to have top 10 recruits. And no, that's kind of not really how he's built his success on. It's about player development. It's about getting guys better. They have a kid who was a top 40 kid coming in this year, Simeon Wilcher, who hasn't really played a lot, and they're still very high on him. And, he's said a million times, Peyton Sievert and Russ Smith at Louisville didn't play for me as freshmen. And so he's kind of banking on really developing Simeon Wilcher as being a huge part of this program going forward. But it's definitely a valid question because you see it all the time where top-rated freshmen or just even regular-rated freshmen don't play and they're gone. Now, can they keep guys? Can, his history of setting players in the NBA and player development still continue here? I think it can, but it's obviously going to be different. There's no question.
See, that's what I was going to ask you, because when you look at his career, and this is a guy coached in Greece, he coached in Iona, he loves to coach. He loves to make a player better. So if St. John's ever got to the point where they had a bunch of one-and-dones, would he truly be happy? Would he truly feel like he would be working with these players the way he wants to?
Yeah, look, we all know he's a New York guy. He grew up here. He only left Iona because he didn't have to move. Like he could have went and gotten the job at Texas Tech. The year before, Maryland had interest in him, and he could have gotten that job. He didn't want to leave this area, and there was a big thing which is him being able to be the person to turn this program around. St. John's hasn't won an NCAA tournament game since 2000. They haven't been to the main draw of the NCAA tournament since 2015. It's a program that's just. He always says it lost its brand. It's fallen off the map the last 2+ decades. And, obviously the fan base or what's left of it is very upset with how this year has gone. I do think it's a little short-sighted to say after he had to completely remake the roster that, he can't get it done. I fully expect them to be a good team next year. I fully expect him to win here. He's not going to go out, on not being able to get it done. But look, they're going to have to do much better in the transfer portal, and they're going to have to develop some of these young players because this year it's just kind of falling apart after a good start.
So is this whole thing over the last couple of days much ado about nothing except for us three codgers who were offended by it?
No, I mean, look, you're not alone. I mean, you see it everywhere. To me, it's a little bit of low-hanging fruit where it's easy to pile on and it's easy to hammer him. And look, I think he went over the line a little bit, no question about it. As someone who's been around basically every game and every press conference, you've heard stuff like this before, so not quite as strong maybe as it was on Sunday, but you've heard him talk about, we're not being unathletic or, we're not a great team. But it's a slow time, slow sports time. There was no NBA this weekend, and, they're big game, and they fall apart again. And, he went off. But I think the way college basketball is now with NIL and, getting to the next level is really all people want. I do not think it's going to hurt them in the long run. Look, coaches are going to use it to negatively recruit. There's no question about that. But they have a strong NIL in place. They were top third, top fourth in the Big East this year. It's only expected to improve for next year. They need to go out and get some good players. They need to go out and find players that better fit the way they want to play. Look, he admitted today he hasn't. He could do a better job than he has. I'm surprised at how this season has fallen apart because at 4-1 in the league in mid-January, it looked like a surefire tournament team that could win a game. And now they basically need, going to have to win the Big East tournament, basically, to make the tournament. It's definitely a surprise, but I still would not bet against him, turning this around in the years to come.
And Zach, I think our radar went up because we're talking about college kids, but do we need to adjust that whole idea of the amateur college athlete now that these guys are getting paid? And does their skin have to be thicker because of that?
It's a really good question. I've seen a bunch of people kind of pose that on social media that, well, now that they're getting paid, are they open to criticism? I rarely will really rip a kid, in my columns or my stories or anything. Even with them getting paid. And look, it's not like we're dealing with Jalen Brunson making $25-30 million a year. Look, St. John's has a bunch of guys who are making six figures, but they're not hauling in millions. This isn't, the SEC football where you have a quarterback who's, making upwards of $6 or $7 million. So, like, I think it's definitely something to consider, though, as we move forward, because they are getting paid. I don't think it's as simple as, well, now you can treat them exactly like pros because they're getting paid, because it's not the same. They're not, like the St. John's players, their best players are going to probably play overseas and, make six figures somewhere, probably similar to what they make in NIL, maybe more. So I don't think it's one of those cases where it's like, well, now they get paid, so now it's free reign. Now we can treat them like the Knicks players or the Mets players or whatever. But I do think it is, something that it's a new landscape now. It's a new world. College athletes getting paid and the freedom of movement, and it's changed college sports so much that I think it is something at least to consider.
All right.
As we kind of move into this new era.
We have 30 seconds, so I give you 67 teams, and then there's UConn. Do you take the field, or do you take UConn to win the national championship?
I'm taking UConn. I actually, my editor thinks I'm nuts. I wrote that in the paper on Monday. I'll take UConn. You can have the field. I think they're better than last year, as good as they were, and I think they're only getting better.
Great stuff, Zach. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, guys.
You got it. That's Zach Brazilla. And so it's not much ado about nothing. He's not backing off of it. But I think the key point in all of this, and Don and Peter keep bringing this up, and I do as well, you're criticizing the players. You chose them. You brought them in. So if they're not athletic enough for what you do, that's an epic fail on your part. I don't care that you were rushed. Why would you bring in kids that weren't good enough to run what you want to run? Also, your point guard in Iona decided to go to Florida rather than join you in St. John's. Doesn't that send up a warning flare that something's not all good and kosher in Denmark?
Oh, I just hate the defense of anyone. Say it's not a big deal because A, he's always done this, and B, he was telling the truth. Like, that just seems to be the defense, right? Well, that's just Rick, and he was also telling the truth. It still doesn't make it right.
Don, tell us about Mazda.